Ahí va a llegar el gol del Arsenal. Ozil. Marca Mesut Ozil.
That is some absolutely world-class sitting down there, staying at home, just sitting down. Oh, look, there he goes. He's eaten his fourth sandwich of the day. This is remarkable.
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning to you too. How you doing?
I'm all right. How's it going with you? Are you staying alert? This is the thing that I need to know. Are you staying alert, James? On a scale of 1 to 100, what would you say your state of alertness is? Because I think that gives us more nuance than simply 1 to 10.
Sure. I lay awake all night with a weapon under my pillow, in case the virus entered the building. I was prepared to take action to defend my property, as it were. So consequently, I'm quite tired this morning. That's the problem. The more alert you are, eventually it's going to catch up with you.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
now I'm less alert. I'm sluggish. This is when I'm most vulnerable.
It's counterproductive. They didn't think about the negative impact of this when they, employed a marketing firm and paid them a lot of money to come up with a brand new slogan like "Stay alert." I mean, it could have been better, couldn't it? Be cautious. Pay attention. Engage. Yes. Maximum preparedness for things.
Control the virus. I do think compelling people to control the virus is complex as well, isn't it? I mean, it's very much not in our control, I would say.
No, it's not. I mean, all the people who need haircuts and beard trims, you're hairy, be wary. I mean, think of the possibilities. And they just came up with stay alert.
I know. Poor old Dominic Cummings and his meagre imagination. But there you go. Yes, how are things on that side of the sea?
They're okay. Nothing really strange or startling to report. We've had some good weather, and of course, when there's good weather, people come out. And I don't know what else to say other than it's sort of just chugging along, and we're waiting for more information about stuff. It's just. I don't know, the perception that it's kind of, I don't think nobody's thinking it's over or anything like that, but I do think there's a measure of, well, we've suffered long enough kind of going on.
Sure, yeah. What I find most fascinating is kind of the briefing strategy that exists around what's happening in the UK. So if you look at like the last 7 days, the briefing to journalists, to political journalists, appears to have shifted quite dramatically across those 7 days. And it almost feels like they kind of let out one version of a story to test the water, to see how the public react to that.
Kite flying, they call that in political terms.
Is that called kite flying?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, funnily enough, to bring in an Arsenal parallel, I kind of feel a bit like there was a little bit of that going on around the Unai Emery situation back in whenever it was, sort of shortly before he sacked. Sometimes it felt like we were hearing contradictory noises coming out of the club, and it almost felt like testing the water. And I think the same thing's been employed here. It is just weird, the kind of drip feed of information. We all got a 10-minute television broadcast here on BBC and ITV last night from the Prime Minister, but it was, quite light really on specifics. And actually today we're hearing we won't get the full specifics until Tuesday. So that is sort of a fairly lengthy period of time, 48 hours potentially, of people not really knowing what they're supposed to be doing.
It does feel like if you're going to give a 10-minute or 12-minute address to the nation, you would have the specifics ready to back up the things that you said. I mean, look, I can only speak about what's happening here, but just from looking at the reaction, obviously a lot of people on my Twitter timeline are in the UK, and there's just sort of an element of confusion as to what exactly is being said and what it means and what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. It doesn't feel like something that is being designed to communicate directly in a clear and concise way, almost as if, there's some strategy behind this lack of clarity. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that's I don't think that would be unfair. I mean, one of the things I found most telling is that, I watched it like everyone else. I was kind of, my expectations were dampened by some of the briefing coming up to it. It was made clear. I think on Thursday morning in the UK, we had headlines saying things like, freedom on Monday and stuff like that. People... And there's a big kind of consequence to that. My wife works with adults with learning difficulties, and it's been really interesting sort of being part of her going out and being a key worker in this period. And one of the things she's encountered is, as a consequence of that media briefing, she had people that she cares for coming up to her and saying, I've heard the virus is over on Monday. Oh. And it's like, it's almost tragic in a way that you have to kind of, then explain the full consequence of the situation. But so, yeah, that kind of messaging can be problematic. But anyway, I found it amazing that it was a kind of a 10-minute 10-minute speech which didn't really mention family. Like, there was no talk about, well, you can or can't visit a family member at this point. And now today there's Dominic Raab's out there in the press kind of sort of trying to firm up what the guidance is on that. But already he's been contradictory in two separate issues this morning. So it was very much focused on the business, getting back to business, which I do understand. But I think there are personal things that matter just as much to people and that sort of were curiously absent. And I kind of find it telling almost that they were. Yeah.
Well, look, let's not dwell too much on the political side of this, because it would drive you mad, in fairness, if you were to stop and think about it too much. So let's just hope that everybody out there listening to this is doing okay and coping well enough, as well as can be expected in the circumstances, and that continues. Has anything caught your eye from a footballing point of view? We know, of course, that the Premier League clubs are convening today to have a meeting regarding Project Restart, and there are some issues regarding some of the bits and pieces in that, like neutral venues, and there's still the issue of the concerns raised by the medical people involved in football that, again, have had little or no clarity. And I think what's been clear is that the Premier League have pretty much not necessarily followed the lead of the government, if you like, but are sort of saying, well, look, we will defer to the medical advice, the scientific advice, and if tomorrow everything was opened up, then the Premier League would open up, etc., etc. They're not sort of out there making decisions on their own. So there are some key issues for the Premier League to deal with today. I mean, how do you think that's going to go? I mean, there's all this talk about relegation being off the table, and the bottom six teams want relegation taken off the table, and all the implications of that. So it's going to be a fairly I won't say contentious meeting, but there's a lot going on.
There is, and there's an unsurprising degree of sort of self-interest at both ends of the table, I think. Obviously the bottom six aren't going to want to forgo their home games in a crucial relegation fight. Obviously the clubs who have a chance of qualifying for Europe and the financial boon that would bring are going to push for that. And obviously, especially Liverpool, hoping for that title win, however much it may have that asterisk against it now. I mean, I found the most sort of compelling development of the last few days the news that Brighton had a third player test positive for the virus, and that Todd Cantwell tweet off the back of it saying, we're just people too. I found that sort of very, what's the word? I mean, it spoke volumes, really. I mean, look, unless you go into some really intense quarantine, players are going to be just as much at risk of getting this virus as anybody else.
Do you feel like it might speak to a greater level of concern among the players than we're aware of right now? Because a few players have come out and said, look, this is scary and frightening and what have you, but very few. And I suppose to one extent that is because they're not quite sure what exactly they're being asked to do yet, because there hasn't been a plan finalized or anything like that. So it's difficult to react properly when you don't know the full details of what it is you're expected to do. But that sort of "we're just people too" tweet suggests to me anyway that there is maybe footballers feel like they're being treated differently than workers in other industries.
Sure. I mean, listen, I felt sorry for, just to go back briefly onto the political note, the guys who were basically told in the UK, well, you've got to go back to work. I kind of thought, I mean, I am working from home, but if you said to me, right, you're going back out to a football stadium tomorrow and it's full, or, the equivalent of working on a construction site, being back at the coalface, as it were, I wouldn't feel massively comfortable with that right now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are players who feel the same, even if it's not for their own concerns, but you don't know people's individual situation. They may have vulnerable people who they live with, who they cohabit with. They might have children that are vulnerable. All these things could play into their decision making. Alternatively, they may be asked to go into quarantine for several weeks or a couple of months, maybe until the season is finished, and they're not in a hurry to leave their families. They're not desperate to do that right now. I don't think that's all players by any stretch. I know that there are plenty of players who want to get back to playing, almost as soon as possible. And I think that, from the stories we've seen about the footballers who have broken lockdown, essentially, a lot of these guys are in that category of being in their 20s, super fit, who probably have a slight feeling that the risk of the virus, rightly or wrongly, probably feel they don't really apply to them. So, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would get back to it on that front, and who also would get back to it because, they feel like it will be a boost to public morale. I have to say, I'm not as convinced as everyone it will be a big boost to public morale. I think that at the moment there are so many questions around it, around the ethics of it, around whether the product that you provide is the product that you lost, that I'm not sure how much it's going to fill people with joy. But I might be wrong. I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, maybe. Look, we all need distraction and we all need some entertainment and everything else. But like you say, there are, we can sit here and do a podcast, but we are not, let's say, taking COVID-19 tests away from anyone. We don't have to do a COVID test, to do a podcast. Yeah, the ethics of it are certainly something. I think the Premier League or the Project Restart document said that, the tests would not in any way influence NHS capacity or anything like that. They wouldn't be taking tests away from the NHS. They would be privately acquiring these tests.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because, yes, they're not taking them away from the NHS, but they could be diverting them to the NHS.
Yeah, but I agree with you. But then why should football, at the same time, I'm not saying that the NHS shouldn't get all the tests that it needs, but why would it be incumbent on football clubs to provide those tests to the NHS?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So there's this sort of circular argument as well, isn't there, about that? Yeah.
I mean, look, the Bundesliga is due to start this weekend, is it?
Yes, and of course we got a story with regards Dynamo Dresden.
Yeah.
Who have to go into 2 weeks of quarantine because 3 players tested positive for COVID-19. 2 of them were asymptomatic, which again is an illustration of how this thing, can spread without anybody really knowing it. So that delays their game anyway, as far as it goes. I think they're due to play Hanover, and they're due that game will be postponed because obviously Dresden can't play. The idea that once football comes back, it will stay back, that's something of a fallacy anyway. It seems to me that there are going to be interruptions because of players and because of officials and people within those groups testing positive and needing to be quarantined. And, are they going to introduce some rules whereby, if you have 2 players, you don't go into quarantine, or you can play, or is there a certain level of infection that your squad can handle without you being put back into quarantine? I don't know. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, I mean, this is where sort of my knowledge comes up short. But, I suppose if you were going to just be quite brutal about it, you could say, well, you just treat an infection like you would an injury, and those players are unavailable for that period. But I mean, what I don't understand, and I hold my hands up to this, is like if those 3 players at Brighton, say, have tested positive, but others have tested negative, does that mean that those others will definitely not develop it? Do you see what I mean? Like, is there does the test only show at a certain point in the virus's progression? Is that when you get the positive? Could you be carrying it and not show positive? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't either, really.
Yeah, it is a really complex one. And I think probably when these... let's just say I'm probably actually slightly less confident than I was 7 days ago about the Premier League returning on its, target date. It just feels to me like when I look at this progress of how we move out of lockdown, I think that it's probably naive to think it will be kind of linear or smooth. I suspect, and actually, in fairness to the government, they have kind of set up this 1 to 5 Nando's hot style scale to kind of demonstrate where we are, like at any point. And I think it is reasonable to expect that there will be movement, in both directions, and that it won't be a clear, smooth kind of down the slope. Because surely, inevitably, as you open stuff back up, you incur risk of a second outbreak.
I mean, I just saw a headline this morning on whether it was Sky News or somebody on Twitter saying that since Germany eased their restrictions, the infection rate has gone back up, which seems normal, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's about it going up in a controlled way, I guess, in a way that's, well, in the UK they're saying that keeps it below 1. But it's very vague. I mean, we're being told the R rate of infection is between 0.5 and 0.9. That's quite a big difference, really. Yeah. So as far as football's concerned, I really have to admit I do not know. I was really pleased to see the doctors kind of come together, because it's important to have people. These people are within football and have the medical qualifications to at least be thinking about the repercussions of this.
They had a lot of questions, didn't they? They really did have a lot of issues, which you would expect, because they're looking at this, from a medical point of view, a scientific point of view, within the confine or within the context of the sport that they're involved in, and even stuff like the responsibility. Who takes responsibility if a player gets sick? What if? And obviously we hope this doesn't happen. But what if a player succumbs to the virus? Who ultimately is responsible for that? Is it the club? Is it the doctors individually? Is it the Premier League? On what basis is the responsibility shared here? And I think what I thought was quite interesting was the statement, but the information from one of the doctors, one that they sort of feel a bit under pressure to give assurances to players that they're not in a position to give, because they just don't know the answer. Therefore, they're not going to say one way or the other, yes, it's safe for you to come back and play, or no, it's not. And also the suggestion that certain clubs are already circumventing or flouting the guidelines with regards to training and things like that. Like, football is a small industry, rumors are rife, and it's easy for stuff to get around from one club to another, because there's always players and there's always staff and there's always these connections. So the idea, maybe the rumor that certain clubs are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, I think you kind of have to take that pretty seriously.
Yeah, I think you do. And I think for the doctors, effectively they've got their kind of Hippocratic oath to abide by. They need to do this job properly, and I'm sure focus would be on them if something went wrong, and they must be aware of that. So that the health and safety of the players has to come first. It is such a minefield, and I don't... how can I put it? I don't judge football for attempting to get back on its feet, as all businesses are attempting to do. And I don't wish to be defeatist about it. I think I hope that I hope everything can go back to something approaching normal. Within appropriate time. I just think I'm just starting to wonder if the dates that they've currently attached, let's say, feel a bit ambitious. They're kind of dependent on a continuing downward trend, which I fear that other areas of society opening up may jeopardise.
Yes, yeah, that's true. One of the things I think that was floated during the week when it comes to the return of football and things that might help or what have you is the idea that 5 subs might be used, which I thought was quite an interesting one.
I think it's been approved by the sort of appropriate FIFA body.
Yeah, IFAB, the International Football Association Board. They have made a temporary amendment to football's laws to cope with returning from the coronavirus enforced break. So there were suggestions that games might be shorter, for example, because we're going to have these fitness issues with players. They haven't played for ages, and then all of a sudden, they're expected to play again. I mean, that is an interesting part of it, isn't it? This, it's not like they've been sedentary. They've all got their fitness workouts to do to whatever extent they can do them, on their bikes or their treadmills or whatever they might have at home to keep this sort of cardio going. But there's a difference between fitness and match fitness, as we know, and the twisting and the turning and the sprinting and stopping and starting and all those things. You lose some of that fitness. Not like us, for example. If you don't play football for a few weeks, you're absolutely fucked the next time you play. But there's certainly a diminishing in the fitness levels of footballers. So even when it comes to football returning, there is going to have to be a kind of mid-season, pre-season, if you like, isn't there? Yeah,
definitely. And in fact, I even spoke to someone within football who said that they think clubs will want to play friendly matches before they play competitive games. Whether that's feasible, I don't know. But, just in order to have that kind of match sharpness before they start competing for points.
Wow.
That is going to be really interesting because, as you say, yes, players have been given regimes to follow at home, but certainly my sense, and certainly the sense of people I've spoken to, is that's not going to be the same thing as a 90-minute environment, direct physical competition. So that puts out surely at least a couple of weeks kind of lag. I mean, Germany, I'm talking off the top of my head, but I don't know exactly when they went back to training, but it was at least 2 weeks, I think, before they were due to play games.
Right.
And I would imagine the same's got to be true at this end. It is full of. It is a minefield, basically, isn't it? Everywhere you tread, you can encounter problems, and it's going to take. It's almost like it's going to take sort of like a heist movie style, pretty incredible run of good fortune and good decisions for it to happen.
The substitution thing, teams will be limited to 3 opportunities during matches to make their subs. So you can use 5 subs. So you have three chances to make subs, as well as halftime. Of course, you can make changes at halftime if you're in Emery.
Great. He can make. Can he make 5 at half time?
God, he would as well, wouldn't he? He would. He definitely would.
I mean, it will be interesting. Like, I think that the games and the use of the squads will be quite different to what you would expect in a normal Premier League season. For example, if you're a young player, like if you're Reece Nelson at Arsenal now, you're thinking, here we go. Because if Arsenal have to play 3 games in 7 days or whatever it's going to be, and there are going to be 5 subs, I mean, your amount of minutes that you are going to get, I think, is going to go up. It
is going to introduce a sort of tactical element, isn't it? As to, you might say that if you use 5 subs, you might offset some of the issues that you have with fatigue. And towards the end of the games, players get tired, etc., and mistakes can happen or teams can take advantage. We watch football, we've watched football long enough to know that, towards the end of games, they can get very open, as players become a bit leggy. This could, on one hand, diminish that, but on the other, adding fresh legs could really add some energy and really up the intensity of the final parts of games as well. So, finding out who's good at managing their substitutions, and that's an interesting one for us as well, isn't it? Because in Mikel Arteta, we're all very optimistic and enthused about what he's going to do as a manager, but in the 3 months when he did have football games, or 2 months when he had football games to manage, one of the things I think that we observed was that substitutions were an area that he was still developing. Would that be a fair way of putting it?
Yeah, I think that is fair. I think that, finding his conviction, about the changes he made and when he was going to make them. We saw him hesitate on a couple of occasions, and sometimes it was costly, or we saw him change his mind. That is something that's going to take a bit of time for him, but I guess having to deal with it, potentially more often, 5 times in a game rather than 3 or 5, and 5 separate players, might accelerate his development in that regard. It'll be really interesting from an Arsenal point of view if and when the season comes back too. I mean, Arsenal right now want it, are one of the clubs sort of pushing for it to happen, and I think there is a feeling within the club that actually, the fixture list and the state of the league table could be relatively favourable to the club if things go well. But I mean, imagine if they don't and Arsenal get off to a bad start. We will just then be playing out a kind of mid-table season at with this weird atmosphere, the weird intensity. It really has potential to sort of feel very, very strange indeed. Yeah,
I'm just looking. Well, I was going to look at the games that we have left, and I was looking on Soccer Base, which is a good website for that kind of stuff. And the fixture list stops after West Ham.
The Arsenal official website has it.
That's a good place to look for fixtures. All right, so
and just in a separate category saying postponed.
Yes. Okay, so have you got them there, or will I?
I have.
Will you read out who we've got, because I've forgotten?
Okay, so these are in order of their theoretical dates. So in the Premier League, Man City away, of course.
Well, it's not away anymore, is it? So it's Man City at where? Villa Park?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's great for us, because we historically, we're not great going away to big clubs, are we? So I suppose we should be grateful to not be having to do that. Brighton, a theory away, but again, not. Sheffield United's in the FA Cup. Ignore that one. Southampton.
Right, that's a difficult one, usually.
Norwich.
Okay.
Wolves.
Okay.
Leicester.
Okay.
Liverpool.
Ooh.
They sound like quite hard games, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Aston Villa.
Right.
And Watford.
Isn't there a North London derby as well?
Oh, sorry, that was after Leicester. I missed that. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so but I wonder why is there such optimism that we could... What is the optimism about? That we could finish in the top 6 to get Europa League football?
European qualification is what the club are reportedly optimistic of. I mean,
right.
You can't even find the Premier League table these days. Premier League table, here we go. So currently we are in 9th, of course, on 40 points. They're just what we need to stay up. 6th place Wolves are on just 43.
Right.
And 4th placed Chelsea are on 48.
Right, that's too far. So we're not getting top 4, I don't think.
I think it's too far, and I also think there's too many other teams, in between who would capitalise there. I think I suppose what you would say, look at the fixture list, is we're supposed to go to Man City. We don't have to if it's neutral venues. We're supposed to go to Tottenham. We don't have to if it's neutral venues.
It doesn't really make the games any easier, though. I don't think it really has any material impact on the difficulty of the game, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah.
What, you don't think being home or away influences the result?
Well, even if we do go away, even if we do play the game in their stadium, there'll be no fans.
Sure.
So I don't really see that there's any significant advantage to not going to Manchester City, you know?
No, true.
Or
I do
Tottenham.
think the absence of fans helps an away team, though. You know, like even if a team comes to play at the Emirates, I'm sure they'd rather do it to 0 people than 60,000. Just because statistically, home and away is sort of shown to influence results in some way. Teams are better at home than they are away for whatever reason. Especially Arsenal, you could say.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Maybe our away record will improve without a lot of the sort of trappings of actual away games.
Yeah, look, look, we're 3 points off 6th place, which would be Europa League qualification, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's certainly not impossible. But
I mean, is having a Europa League impossible? Is a fair question.
well, that's the other question. You know, is there going to be a push to qualify for European competitions that won't exist or can't exist, or are going to be played like domestic games at neutral venues? That surely can. I mean, part of the reason that you want to be in Europe is because of the financial benefits of being in Europe, because you sell, you know, an extra round of tickets, of course. Or, you know, in the group stages, you know, you've got a certain amount of games.
We are in an FA Cup quarter-final as well.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a shot at, you know, a shot at a final, a shot at a trophy.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure Mikel Arteta would love, you know, to get under his belt. Yeah, it's very odd. I mean, it's just very difficult to look at it and kind of imagine what it will be like, you know?
Yeah. Look, it's one of those things where it seems to change day by day, you know?
Yes, by the time that you're listening to this, it will probably...
Yeah. Well, what you think is possible on one day looks impossible the next, or they talk about doing something, you know.
And of course, the Bundesliga will provide a model of sorts, although I would say that the way Germany has combated the virus and sort of their management of the cases is different to what we've seen here in the UK.
Yeah. Are they're just behind closed doors games in the Bundesliga? They're not at neutral venues, right?
I believe that's correct.
Right.
Yeah, the neutral venues thing is about fans congregating, isn't it? That's
But are they going to do that in Germany? Are German fans going to stay away? Even if they can't get into the ground, are they going to congregate in the streets around or in the bars? Or I don't know what the situation is with regards bars and sort of public gatherings and what have you in Germany.
It's
so I don't know. But
yeah, I mean, even in this country, we're in a position now where there are kind of contradictions at play. So you're told effectively you can be outside all day if you are exercising or even sunbathing now, or, you know, relaxing.
That's so optimistic in England, isn't it? And Ireland, of course. Yes, you can sunbathe all you like. Just got to wait for the fucking sun.
Yeah, they can bank on that sun. But, you know, so a fan could walk to a ground saying, I'm just, you know, exercising here. I've walked here. That's my, you know, or I would choose to sit outside. You can, in theory, do that. And yet, at the same time, they don't want to encourage that. So, yeah, it's all very complex and very contradictory. And sort of, that's why I listen. I think it's easy to think that people are kind of being kind of criticising whatever the government does and any response. And I think there is a degree to which that's probably true. People love to moan, but I do think that it's the lack of clarity and understanding why certain things are permitted and why certain others aren't that leads to, you know, a lot of the sort of confusion and distress we've seen over the last 24 hours.
Well, at least people are allowed to do congas. That's good.
It's good to do the conga. The good news is if Arsenal win at, you know, Man City, not away but sort of away, we can just form a socially distanced conga around Islington.
That will make everyone feel better, and we'll forget all our worries.
Yeah, and as long as we're 2 metres apart, it's absolutely fine.
Yes, and once you're staying alert and being cautious and paying attention and engaging maximum preparedness and watching out and stuff, it'll be fine. It'll all
great.
be fine. So don't
Good
worry.
news.
Don't worry. Look, I think we'll take a break here because we don't really have much else to talk about. Oh, apart from you saw what happened with
Mickey
during the week, did you?
I did, yeah. But wasn't it sort of knocked down by Mickey's right-hand man? Mickey.
Yeah, Mino Raiola, he said it was fake news that Mkhitaryan had said, Arsenal should sell him. It is quite curious, isn't it, that we turned down 10 million in January going, no, we want more than that. And I think we would bite their hands off if they gave us 10 million now.
Oh, man, I can't really see us getting a fee for Mkhitaryan, and that's not to discredit him as a player as much as I would enjoy doing that. It's because of the transfer market and the financial situation and the size of his wages. That's the thing. I mean, a club's taking on a hefty load there by swallowing his salary.
I thought you were going to say the size of his
Mickey,
but thankfully you didn't. Okay, we will take a break. We're going to come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you sent to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog on the Arseblog Facebook page, facebook.com/the Arseblog, and on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. And if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon, later today you will get access to an interview in which Gunnerblog interviews Arseblog about Arseblog. That's right. We did this last week.
We swapped chairs, basically.
Yeah. So it's quite sort of like the history of Arseblog and the podcast and the site and all that kind of stuff. And James is the tough David Frost-esque interviewer, and I am not Richard Nixon. That's all I can say. But you will get access. You will get access to that as well if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. Right, I'm going to start this one because I think this is a very important question, James.
Okay.
And it comes from Owen, who's at Owen Halifax. And he says, on the Arsecast Extra a few weeks ago, James mentioned a very good curry house he's been using, but didn't give any details. I live locally, and I DM'd him to ask him about it, but he ignored the message. Has he become too famous to engage with the average man? Also, I think he just really wants to know where the good curry is.
Sure. Well, listen, let's help out a restaurant in this difficult time. I mean, I don't know when this message was sent, but probably if it was pre-lockdown, I was probably just thinking, I just want to be able to go make sure I can get a seat in my curry house if this gets too popular.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was a brilliantly kept secret, but you can't go in there now, and they are doing takeaway, so I might as well try and get them some business. So if you live in the sort of Clerkenwell area, Cafe Tiffin is an excellent curry house.
Cafe Tiffin?
Yes, Tiffin.
It doesn't really sound like a curry house, in fairness.
It sounds like a cafe.
But Tiffin is kind of like a chocolate biscuit of some kind, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's also something in India. It's like a type of meal in India, like a kind of light meal, I think. I think a tiffin is like you get little containers with different foods in.
Okay, I'm looking it up here. Tiffin is an Indian English word for a type of meal. It refers to a light tea time meal at about 3 p.m.
Yeah.
But tea time is not till like 5 or 6.
It's probably the time difference to India or something.
Or to a light breakfast containing or consisting of typical tea time foods. Right.
Nevertheless, despite this name, this is a relatively traditional curry house, but it's delicious. And actually, should restaurants ever open again, you can bring your own booze, which is always good. And they're really nice guys. And listen, it's a really tough time for catering industry generally. So why not get a delivery from Cafe Tiffin?
There you go.
They're on Just Eat. They're on. I think they're probably on Deliveroo as well.
Yeah, but don't use fuckers like Deliveroo. I would say if you can go directly to the restaurant, go directly to the restaurant, because, you know, the Deliveroos and the Uber Eats and all those kind of things, they take a huge commission off each order, and it doesn't really benefit the restaurant as much as you might hope. I mean, look, you're ultimately out to benefit your belly, to get some nice food in it, which is fine, but maybe, try and not use the Amazons of the food delivery world. There you go.
Guys,
someone's going to give out to me again now for giving out about Amazon.
Does that happen?
Yeah.
Is it Jeff Bezos? Does he get in touch?
Yeah, at Jeff162 on Twitter, and he's like, "You fucking lefty piece of shit giving out about Amazon all the time. We don't care about your super woke liberal ways. We're a behemoth, and you better watch it, because you're really impacting our business. I only made $9 trillion in profit yesterday, and it should have been $9,003,003. So fuck you, Arseblog." That's what happens quite regularly.
That is what happens all the time. And if you do order from Cafe Tiffin, maybe say, "Oh, yeah, James recommended it on his podcast," because I don't know, they might sling me a free naan bread or something.
Ooh, what's your favourite naan bread? Do you like them just plain, or do you like the cheesy naan bread or the?
I like a garlic naan.
Yeah.
What about you?
I kind of like the. There's one with cheese, which I like. I don't know what the cheese is.
There's a shop very near Arsenal in Finsbury Park.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure people will have seen it on Blackstock Road that only sells naan bread.
Get out. Really?
Yeah. It's like a naan bread shop, and you can buy I think one naan is like £1, but then I think 10 naans is like £7 or something. And they do all different flavours. I mean, I did hear a rumour that it was like a front for something else, but yeah, there's a naan bread shop in Finsbury Park.
Well, there you go. Yeah, well, look, you never know. You might get a free naan bread, some free poppadoms.
This is what I'm hoping for. Do you know what I mean?
Nice
a little
yogurt
mango
dip.
Chutney.
Yeah.
Something just to say thank you, James. Because I like Cafe Tiffin. Also, I am, in theory, when things move around a bit more, I am moving away from this area. So this creepy man messaging me won't be able to catch me in there anyway.
Okay.
So that's why I've given it out. Otherwise, I would never deign to do that. Well, I don't want to engage with my public.
All right, your question. I'll just leave that there. I've got nothing to say to that.
Yeah, leave that in.
Yeah.
It's important people know. If you see me in the street, do not approach me.
No.
Be alert.
Yeah, not signing any fucking autographs.
Be alert. I am dangerous and I am armed.
And I'm singing to a Pizza Express.
Yeah. I mean, I am quite conspicuous. No, that's a joke. Do come and say hi, and it is always lovely. But
sure.
Also, stay alert.
And 2 meters away.
To stay 2 meters away, for God's sake. Right. Yes, I've got a question for you that I haven't seen anyone else ask.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
Have you seen the new Arsenal kits that were supposedly leaked? And if so, what do you think of them?
I saw them because we did a story on Arseblog News.
Of course.
I mean, I quite like it, I guess. It's got the kind of 90s, 80s kind of... remember that great Nike kit that we had with the white collar? Maybe the first Bergkamp season was 94, 95. And it sort of had those kind of... What do they call them?
Like lightning flashes.
Yeah, chevrons.
Okay, yeah.
So it looks a little bit like that, except they're sideways. I think the Nike ones are downwards, if I remember. I can't remember. Yeah, horizontal and vertical. They have official terms for down and up when it comes to design stuff.
This would be better sideways.
Yes,
yeah, that's what they say.
Slightly sideways, pointing down at 14-degree angle. Yeah, I think I quite like it. Isn't the away kit supposed to be white or something like that?
There's been an away kit floating around, But I mean, on the back of the home shirt, I don't know if you can see it now, there's like a little badge. And a couple of people have been in touch to say that it looks quite a lot like the Gunnerblog logo that I use on Twitter.
Oh, yeah, you're fucked.
I'll imagine that'll lead to me being sued or something.
Well, you had it first.
Yeah, but I mean...
No, you had it first, finders, keepers.
So do you think I could maybe sort of negotiate some sort of commission on sales of the new kit?
I don't know that you should negotiate. I think you should be looking for at least a 10% stake in the club.
Yeah.
Get our foot in the door, and we can start to ease...
Usmanov style.
Yeah, start to ease Stan and Josh out of the way. Do a GoFundMe to buy a few more shares, etc., etc. Undermine Stan from within.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to let me in the boardroom, whatever happens. But, we can but dream. What do you think of the new Emirates slogan? Having been Fly Emirates, I think for the duration of our partnership with them, on the new shirt, it appears to be Emirates, fly better.
I would like to know in what way Emirates fly better than other airlines.
You're allowed a Falcon on. We know that much.
Oh, of course. Of course. There's a free Falcon in first class for everybody that wants to go there.
I mean, it's not a good time to be an airline, is it?
No, it's not. And it might not be for some time. Maybe they should just change it to fly eventually.
Safely. Yeah, fly eventually. Yeah. Oh,
Emirates.
Remember flying?
Yeah, Emirates. Walk for the time being.
Yeah,
I mean, it looks okay. So, we'll see. I'll be happy to see us wear it because it'll mean, we've got some football back. So,
absolutely. Well, that was my question to you.
Okay.
And, it got asked because I've got an Ian, haven't I, on the show? It's not fair, but there you go.
Yeah. All right. Let's have a question here. Boom, boom, boom. I should have one. I did have one. Okay. Decaf Metcalf's Analytical Calf, who's at the Merhaf, says, inspired by the Last Dance documentary, which is the Michael Jordan one, what story from the world of football, doesn't have to be Arsenal-centric, would you watch a 10-part documentary on?
Great question. I saw this myself. So you've watched Michael Jordan, haven't you? Last Dance, sorry.
Yeah, I've watched the first 6, so I think there's 2 more.
And are they coming out week by week?
2 a week, I think.
2 a week, right? Yeah. Okay. I've seen 4. I've seen 4 of them.
Okay, so I'm 2 better than you when it comes to this.
Yes, you're winning in this game of
6-4.
Top trumps. I'm enjoying it very much.
Yeah, me too.
It's very good. I came at it from a place of considerable naivety about the NBA. My only real knowledge of this sort of 90s era of the NBA was from computer games, which I played at the time on my PC.
Right.
I think I had like NBA Jam 97 or something.
Right.
So I have a vague knowledge. One thing I saw Sean Ingle, maybe, of The Guardian, tweeting about this, and it gave me a slight pause for thought. It was sort of querying the... If it's a documentary that's slightly puffy around Michael Jordan, it's quite favourable to him.
Yeah, I saw a tweet this morning, or certainly The Guardian tweeted out something that, it was, I don't know, some kind of PR piece and what have you. And I guess it would be interesting to read after the fact. I'm sure, there are people who are well aware of the intricacies and the complexities of Michael Jordan and his career and character that, I'm not aware of. And I would say that probably the price of access to Michael Jordan for something like this was at least a sort of a friendly-ish kind of look at some of the things which might be deemed controversial. There's something coming up, I think, in episode 5 or 6, which I won't mention here, but it's the sort of thing that gets a little bit glossed over. But then there's part of me, where something happens online, you see like a cute video, you see a puppy rescuing a kitten, and he takes the puppy or the kitten out of the river, and everyone's going, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And then within 12 hours, there's somebody who's got evidence that the puppy is actually racist and a member of the Ku Klux Klan, you know? There's that sort of element of things that pretty much everything that people are enjoying, there's got to be a way of taking it down in one way or another. And I'm not saying that like maybe there is a lot more to the Michael Jordan story than I understand, and I'm not dismissing that, but I just don't want at the moment to get into it. If that is that wrong of me? Should I be more open? I just feel like when I finish watching the documentary, I'd be happy to go back and read a lot more.
I think that's absolutely right, actually, and I think that you're judging that documentary on its merits as a piece of filmmaking, essentially, and it is telling you a story. Of course, no one story is the whole story. It's the same with, if you see an interview with somebody, you have to be acutely aware, like a written interview, for example, that it is one side of a story. It doesn't mean it's not interesting, but you have to you take it on its own grounds. And this is an outstanding piece of documentary making. I mean, there's no doubt about that whatsoever. And also, it makes you think a lot about the power of storytelling in sport. I mean, I saw your blog post the other day about other great sports documentaries, and there really are so many. I mean, the sort of, is it ESPN's 30 for 30 series? I mean, they're fantastic, I think. Yeah.
I watched the two Escobars again last night.
That's a great one, for example. And I forget which other ones. I mean, when we were Kings, you mentioned, what's the climbing one? I forget.
Oh, Free Solo.
And
there's another one called Meru. You should see that.
I really do want to, but I mean, I know it'll make me feel very unwell.
It can do, yeah. It might make you feel a bit queasy, but
in terms of football, what would I love to see? I mean, something I actually think that was done very well, and it's definitely worth trying to dig out a copy of if you've not seen it. I really enjoyed the Keane Vieira one that they did for ITV. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah.
It was very good, and I would watch something with the kind of depth that's been applied to The Last Dance on sort of the Wenger-Ferguson rivalry.
Oh, that is a fucking great one, yeah.
Yeah, that would be really great. And it's sort of that 90s period where there's enough distance from it now. I think people would talk about it quite honestly, quite openly. I think that would be really, really, really good. I'm trying to think of other stuff, really. I mean, it's hard because in some areas you feel like we're quite well covered, as a sport. There's kind of... What's kind of fascinating for me as someone who's not a dyed-in-the-wool basketball fan is kind of what I'm learning. It all feels new. It all feels fresh, where I'm not sure that, 89 is a great documentary, and that was on the other night too. Yeah. And it doesn't leave me feeling like we need another one necessarily on that.
Sure. I think this isn't necessarily about a specific sporting event or anything like that, but more of a broad look at, I think there's probably something really interesting to be made about personalities in sport and how big personalities used to be in almost every sport, and now there's a sort of, I don't want to say blandness, because there are still some characters, but when you think back...
Sanitization.
Yeah, almost. The sanitization of sport and people's behaviours and things like that. So you think about all the sports that we used to watch, like tennis.
Dennis Rodman being a great example.
Dennis Rodman, for sure. But then when I go back to like the 70s and the 80s and I think about tennis, and there was McEnroe and Borg, and there was Jimmy Connors and Ilie Nastase and these players. And then you got the start of these sort of incredibly gifted but robotic kind of players like Ivan Lendl, who would become... brilliant at the game, but didn't have that kind of personality. Andre Agassi, people like that. And now we don't quite have those characters. Snooker, you know, Jimmy White and Alex Higgins and Ronnie O'Sullivan, of course, is a massive character, but I couldn't tell you the name of the other snooker players, darts and things like that. I don't know. It just feels like the real extremes of character that we got at top level sport aren't really as prevalent anymore. And I think maybe it's to do with money, maybe it's to do with just the culture, and these characters don't have a way of I don't know. Well, it's not that they can't connect. I don't know. It's just we just don't seem to have those guys anymore. Maybe it's because the sports themselves have become more professional, and you know, there's a need for greater dedication to reach the top level. You kind of have to put aside some of the flamboyance that some of those guys had. But I think it would be quite an interesting series.
Yeah, and maybe it almost comes from the sort of level of media scrutiny. It kind of forces a degree of conformity, you know, because every indiscretion is highlighted to such an extent. I mean, look, I love the sports docs, and what's been actually genuinely quite cool is that I was kind of hoping to, obviously my wife and I, we watch telly together all the time, and we rarely will watch something sort of separately. It's quite, we usually, you know, it's like, okay, this is what we're watching. And I was like, I don't know if she will go for the Michael Jordan thing. I was kind of thinking that would have to be filed along Sutherland Till I Die as something I'll sort of get through in my own time. But someone recommended it to her, and she, who's not a massive sports fan herself, has absolutely loved it. So I'm hoping that's sort of opened the floodgates for like loads of sports documentaries to be on our TV screen during lockdown. But we shall see.
All right.
Okay, let's have another question. Okay, this is from Pete, who's at Pete Hines 8. And he says, maybe in around 1995, I remember being very excited about a report linking Gary Speed with Arsenal. I was so disappointed when it didn't happen and he landed with Everton in 1996. Is there a player from the 90s we were linked with that disappointed you when it didn't happen?
Christ, I can't remember. I can't remember that far back. The transfer
Can I suggest
rumors.
one if you've
yeah,
not got
please do.
It was suggested by Tim Stillman actually in a tweet recently that he referenced this rumour, and I don't think it was a rumour. I think it was something Arsenal really tried to do, and that was signing Patrick Kluivert. I don't know if you remember that, but
I do.
I mean that was incredibly exciting at the time because he was a young player. You know, he'd had a stormer in 1996 at the Euros and was a big star. And I was certainly, I was probably about 10, 11 years old, and the idea of Kluivert alongside Bergkamp, you know, two Dutch forwards up front, was incredibly exciting. So that was one that jumped out to me.
I'm trying to remember who we were even linked with, you know?
Yeah. It's hard to go back that far.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at, wasn't Chris Sutton somebody who was supposedly we were after when he was at Norwich before he went to Blackburn?
No regrets there for
me neither. Hello, Chris.
Yeah, I'm trying to think other players. Gary Speed, I do have a vague recollection of that. I remember, this is slightly later, so this is cheating. I think it's 2002. I really wanted Arsenal to sign Harry Kewell.
Well, he was certainly linked.
Oh, yeah. I think Arsenal definitely wanted to do the deal. He went to Liverpool in the end from Leeds. Leeds were relegated. And, you know, there was a sort of tug of war, scramble for people like Viduka, Kewell. And Kewell was the kind of jewel in the crown for Leeds. He could kind of... Yeah, he was talked about as Arsenal were looking him to play the kind of Bergkamp role, you know, sort of as number 10 off the main striker, left-footed, lots of talent, but obviously injuries really affected him both at Leeds and then massively when he went to Liverpool.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I just can't, you know, there have been so many stories and so many players linked with us down the years that it's hard to remember one that I really wanted us to sign that we didn't.
Another name that was mentioned in the 90s, I mean, I mentioned Pepe Signori last week, but one that came up almost every summer in the late 90s under Arsene Wenger was actually Robbie Fowler. Was always being talked about.
Really? I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
I think it's because of the age I was then, when you're sort of like so hungry for rumours and football news, that I have, you know, kind of stored a few of these in my mind. I'm trying to think if I can remember any in other areas of the pitch, like midfield and defence, but like, none are jumping out.
Again, it was Wenger era, so it was early 2000s. Weren't we supposed to sign Canizares, the goalkeeper, before we signed Jens Lehmann?
Yeah, there were a lot of goalkeepers who were sort of linked and didn't happen. I mean, one that I'd forgotten about until recently, I wrote a piece about it, was Marcos from Brazil. I don't know if you remember. Because I think what happened was Rami Shaban broke his leg, I think, in 2002 or 2003. Yeah. And it left us I think Seaman got an injury at goalkeeper as well. And so Marcos, this was 2003, I think, because it was after the World Cup in 2002, in which he'd kind of played very well. Brazil, Palmeiras had been relegated. He came as far as Hertfordshire and London Colney, all the way from Brazil, and then decided he couldn't go through with the deal, which was kind of amazing.
It's a long way to come.
It's a long way to come to say no with a late change of heart. But there were a few other goalkeepers. I mean, Jerzy Dudek is another one we all remember, I guess, who was very closely linked.
Yeah. To go back to the original question, though, I can't remember players from the 90s. But, you know, I think that's to do with all the stuff I was smoking back then.
Have you got another question?
I do have another question from Brookacy, who's on the Discord. He says, football hits ground zero. You're the FA chief executive. What changes do you make to the game? You can have two. Two changes, whatever you like.
Ground zero means basically we're just starting again.
Yep. Reset. Boop. Off you go. Two changes. Your word is final. You are the law.
Oh, it's not easy. Okay, I'm just going to say the first things that come to my head and just let that affect the game for perpetuity. Is that all right?
Yes, of course.
I am coming round to the idea of a salary cap. Part of that is selfishness, in terms of I look at teams like Man City, like potentially Newcastle, what they can pay.
Is
thinking
the salary cap a figure, a defined, a certain amount, or is it a percentage of?
I think it would have to be a defined figure, I think, for me. I think that then, the team that are 20th and the team that are first can pay the same. I think that's what I would do. I think it would be a lot more competitive.
It would be an interesting development, certainly. But whether
I feel like if you make it a percentage of turnover, you leave yourself open to it being sort of manipulated in the same way FFP has been.
What? I mean, are you saying that Newcastle's new Saudi owners might, via a third-party company which is associated with them in a very vague way, provide them with a multi-$100 million sponsorship deal which would increase their revenue way above what it might normally be? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that might be a possibility.
Wow, you are really cynical today.
And my second thing is I would bin off VAR. I would absolutely bin it off.
End of VAR.
Yeah, that would be me. And listen, there'd be good and bad for that. I mean, Arsenal, it would enable them to get closer to the likes of City, but it would also enable maybe certain other clubs to play catch-up with them. But I just think it would create a more interesting sporting challenge for teams and for fans if it was a more level playing field financially. What do you think about that idea? Do you think that it's mental? I mean, I don't think it will ever happen, but...
The salary cap?
Yeah.
It makes more and more sense when you look at what's happening to football clubs and how much of what they spend on wages in relation to what they turn over, the percentage is too big, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the biggest cost that they have. So if there's some way of making football more, what's the word I'm looking for, fireproof or whatever it might be, if something like this were to happen again, then it does make some sense.
I mean, part of the reason I've been thinking about it, I was listening to one of the Arsenal Vision pods recently, and Elliot was kind of making the case for sort of and I think to a degree he was sort of playing devil's advocate to start the conversation, but for the sort of American model, of salary caps and a draft system. And, the thrust of his case was kind of, there's a lot of teams who kind of aren't really playing with the possibility to win in the Premier League. And does that make for an engaging, exciting, attractive product if you sort of know your team has these limitations on it? And and maybe it's because I've been watching The Last Dance as well, and maybe it's a bit sort of pie in the sky, but I do think there is something to be said for a model that provides a bit more unpredictability. I mean,
well, yeah, that makes the assumption that people are in the sport to be,
of course,
involved in sport.
Oh right, yeah.
Well, you know what I mean. It's like, okay, well, am I as the owner of a football club happy to test my team's sporting capabilities every season against 19 teams who might be of relatively similar quality, or am I, as part of the big four, the big six, do I prefer a construct in which our participation in the biggest money spinning events is
guaranteed,
more or less guaranteed? So what you're asking for is turkeys voting for Christmas in a way, which I don't think is going to be the case. If you were just interested in sport as sport, then yeah, but not the other way around.
But in this scenario, I'm in charge, aren't I?
Yeah. So you get to say.
Yeah.
You get to say, okay.
What would you do?
I did think of one there a minute ago.
Chainsaws?
No, I mean, look, the temptation to go down the whole rollerball side of things and introduce levels of extreme violence into the game are very, very tempting. It has to be said, a sort of gladiator-style Premier League. But, there would be issues in terms of running out of players, and I'm not sure people need to see limbs being hacked off and what have you. So the one that I was going to say, I can't remember what it is now. It was something to do with fuck it, and it was quite good. I can't remember. Don't
worry. I mean, I think I've sorted football, so it's fine. Wise Marklar on the Discord says, will we benefit from this time off at all in terms of fitness, dealing with the Emery hangover, etc.?
No idea. No idea whatsoever.
Mikel Arteta continues to talk a very good game, though. I mean, I don't know if you saw him.
He does, yeah.
On with Ian Wright, but he's great. He's very compelling. He says the right stuff. And, will we benefit? We might benefit in that we might have Kieran Tierney fit.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's maybe about who is least negatively impacted by this, rather than who benefits per se. I'm still quite annoyed that I can't remember what that thing that my change to the game was. It's really bugging me.
Mine were VAR and the salary cap. Did they spring off a thought in your mind? Was it about
goals?
The laws of the game?
Yes, that's what it was. I would introduce a sin bin system.
Okay. Like a kind of orange card.
Kind of like an orange card, where the foul or the offence isn't necessarily worthy of a red card, but you go sit in the sin bin for 10 minutes, so your team has a temporary disadvantage and you're down to 10 men.
Let me push you for some more details.
I don't have any. I can't think about the intricacies of it.
Right.
But
what sort of offences do you have in mind here?
Like, okay, let's say a guy gets a yellow card early in the game for a foul. It's a foul and he stops a thing and it's a yellow card.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And then at some point in the game, he goes in for a tackle. We've seen this happen before. He goes in for a tackle. He realizes at the last minute, I'm not going to make it. And the guy that he's intending to tackle knows that the guy's on a yellow card and sort of makes the most of that particular incident. And there may or may not be any contact or what have you, or any significant contact. And of course, without VAR anymore, the referee, because you've banned it, the referee can't see, but he's not 100% certain if this player has or hasn't cleaned out the other guy. There you can give an orange card and he's gone for 10 minutes because you're not 100% sure if it should be a second yellow, but you know he's done something that isn't quite there. I don't know. I mean, I'm just floating it out there. I'm sure there are better ways of implementing it.
Yeah, a sin bin. I think it's an interesting idea. I think that at the moment, the gap between a yellow card and a red card and the way it impacts a team or impedes a team is pretty wide, isn't it?
If you dive to try and win a penalty and the referee sees that you dive, that would be a sin bin offence for me.
Right.
Not just a yellow card, because that's bullshit.
Yeah.
I would also introduce it for goalkeepers who time waste.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, I think in that instance, potentially 2 yellows would equate to an orange. Like, basically, because a ref's going to be so reluctant to send a goalkeeper off for that, right? If they do it twice. But maybe if it's a sin bin, it'll be like they'll be a bit more willing to dish out that punishment.
Think about the entertainment. Think about the entertainment.
Because it's 10 minutes of a centre-half in goal or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Or they've got to bring on a goalkeeper and then they've used that sub and then... I don't know, yeah, there's great implications there.
Another one that I would implement, and it's not simply for entertainment purposes, is I would introduce a system by which if a player picks up a head injury and is concussed, you can replace him without using up one of your subs.
That's a great suggestion. That is a great suggestion. I would second that. I would support you in that.
All right.
If it came to it.
Thank you.
Let's have another question, shall we?
Yeah.
What about this one from Tosh on Twitter, who says, with recent links to Willian, Gerson, Gabriel, and having already bought Martinelli last summer, do you think we will go Brazilian in the future? And if so, do you feel we might encounter problems with work permits as we did with Wellington?
Don't know. There was another one on Twitter as well from Baloney, who's @6Baloney6, who said, Willian, why? And I looked up Willian on Transfermarkt, and I looked at his agent, who just happens to be Sport Invest UK, run by Kia Jarabchin. That's why. That's your why. I don't know that we need Willian. He's a good player, but...
Yeah, all I can say about Willian is, as many people know, my brother is a Chelsea fan, and he thinks Willian is a really, really good player.
I think he's a good player as well. I do think so, but...
He is nearly 32.
Until then, though, James.
Until then, he remains 31. So it would be a little bit of an odd one. But maybe if there is no money, and Arsenal for transfer fees at any rate, maybe they're just thinking we have to do it. Have to get the frees that we can. I mean, I think that will we go Brazilian? I think there are a couple of reasons why. Yes, I think that Brexit potentially making the EU slightly more problematic in a funny sort of way makes South America more appealing or as appealing in some ways. If you have to get a visa for a guy from France, you might as well get one for a guy from Brazil. And I also think that it's an area where Arsenal might feel they can have a slight competitive advantage in that it's not like tons of people are arriving from South America to the Premier League. And if you look at who Arsenal have, in terms of they have Edu, who obviously is very well connected on that side. They've had a long-standing scouting network there. They have Raul Sanyehi, who worked on the Neymar deal with Brazil, so is used to sort of those sorts of negotiations. And as you say,
good clean deal that, by the way. Yeah.
Good clean deal, no complaints. As far as I'm aware, there are no complaints at the time.
None whatsoever.
So, and they have links. Well, they have links with certain agents who have history and clients in that part of the world. And also, the other thing to say is, as long as Brexit hasn't formally happened, I know we've submitted our article, whatever it was, and we are doing it, but it's not happened yet. There are a lot of players in Brazil and Argentina and other South American countries who have EU passports, like Gabriel Martinelli, who has, Italian heritage, and so they can, for now, get in easily on those grounds. So, in short, do I think we'll be going Brazilian? Yes, and I think there are lots of different reasons why South America is going to be a bit of a focus for us.
Right, okay. Isn't there a thing that if the transfer is of a certain value, you automatically get a visa?
That's an interesting one. I don't know. I have to say I don't know. I know that Arsenal... The question mentioned Wellington, and he, of course, was someone who fell foul of the visa criteria. You have to, these transfer values weren't especially high, but Arsenal were able to obtain special talent visas for people like Denilson. Rio Miyachi was another who...
Wasn't Alex Song one?
Possibly. Although he might have qualified on French basis. I don't know. I think you're right. I've got a memory of Alex Song getting one, actually. And I think when Rio Miyachi got his, I think Arsene Wenger had given testimony on the player's behalf, and that had been factored in. And
poor old Joel Campbell.
Well, exactly. Joel Campbell had to go out onto Spain, didn't he, on the perennial loans, as did Wellington. So... It's a tricky one, but I guess it's a problem we're still going to encounter more and more. The crucial thing, I think, is often inclusion at international level. If the players are being recognised internationally by their appropriate age group, I think it's easier to kind of sneak that through. And certainly what happened with Wellington is that because he'd fallen out with his club, he wasn't really playing those international games, and that is why he didn't get his permit.
All right. Right. Final one for today comes from Facebook. It comes from Tremaine Woe, who just says, best Ray Parlour stories.
The best Ray Parlour story is the miracle that is Ray Parlour's body at his age and drinking what he's getting through. I guess with his lifestyle, he has a lot of time to work out. And he must be doing it. That's all we can say. He's got to be really pushing his body to burn off those calories.
His commitment to drinking beer at any time of the day or night is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And staying in shape doing it. He's living the dream. But best Ray Parlour stories... I was at the 2002 FA Cup final, which was, the ultimate Ray Parlour story. And what a goal that was. And upsetting Tim Lovejoy in the process. I don't think you can say much fairer than that. I don't know if I've got any sort of, individual personal Ray Parlour stories. I have met Ray Parlour a couple of times. He's just a great raconteur. Some people just have that facility for storytelling.
Yes.
And he absolutely does. Everything is quite a sort of honed anecdote at this stage, and he delivers them impeccably. Do you have a particular Ray Parlour memory?
No, I don't. This was an odd question to ask without one of those from either of us, wasn't it?
Who did he score a hat-trick against?
Werder Bremen? Was it Werder Bremen?
Yeah.
That was good.
That was great. I've got a feeling he might have got one against Newcastle as well. But yeah, I loved Ray Parlour as a player. I really loved the sort of combination of industry and ability. Yeah. I think I once said on here that I'd rather watch Ray Parlour than Mesut Ozil, and I got a lot of stick about it.
Funny that.
Yeah. Well, I kind of mean it. Like, I do kind of mean it. I love players who... I just love those sort of real workhorses. It's kind of why I love Danny Welbeck when he played. Like, I love people who absolutely leave everything out there. It's just endearing to me.
Yeah, like there are players who are technically better and technically more gifted and have more individual skills and what have you, but somebody who makes it through, not that they're not talented or good footballers, of course they are to play at that level, but what they have to give in terms of effort and hard work, there's something really admirable about that, isn't there? That you know.
And I have a soft spot for those guys. I mean, you know, a guy who's sort of become a bit of a joke figure at Arsenal now and who certainly was a limited player, but if I think back to 2007, 2008, what Mathieu Flamini was doing in that midfield was kind of extraordinary, I thought. You know, just like charging around, pointing. I'm a sucker for that stuff.
Making sure he got a big contract offer from another club. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
The motivation there was... Yeah,
I guess my favourite Ray Parlour memory is that he never left for AC Milan on a Bosman free transfer.
Yeah, that is true. Well done, Ray. Okay, well, look, we'll leave it there for this week. Hopefully, at some point, we might get something Arsenal to talk about. It has been very quiet from an Arsenal point of view. We are ignoring as much as possible all the transfer stories that amazingly continue to clog up my News Now feed. It's just, you know, do they not know what's happening, or is it just... It's just habit, or
yeah, and
something more cynical
for them. That's what I wonder. Like, are people still really thinking, "Oh, this is going to happen"? I mean, I'm the same as you. It's not really my focus at the moment.
No, all of your focus is on
Mickey.
So, all right. Well, look, we'll leave it there for this week. Lots to come during the week. Of course, we've got that big interview, which will be available to Patreon members and whatever other bits and pieces we can come up with. So until then, folks, take it easy. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.